Mr. Contreras, $16 million, 250 checks, 7 years.
Managed the district's finances for years and kept every account in order.
For 17 years, Jorge Armando Contreras handed his colleagues financial reports that said everything was fine. Every single report was a lie. By the time investigators opened a mini fridge in his Yorba Linda home, they already knew why.
You falsified the bank statements you handed your own colleagues every month.
I need to speak with my attorney before I continue.
He would never get the chance to explain. Within days, federal agents would walk into his Yorba Linda home with a search warrant and find a small white mini fridge in his garage. It was not full of food. It was full of cash, stacked, banded, and chilled like leftovers. Beside it sat 57 Louis Vuitton handbags lined up on shelves like a boutique. $16,694,942. Skimmed from a school district where 8 out of every 10 children qualified as poor. 70 months in federal prison. And one photograph that would make this case famous. Before we go any further, I want you to remember the number. $16.7 million, stolen from a district where most of the kids qualify for free lunch. Drop a comment if that number hits you the way it hit me. And subscribe if you are new here. We hold these people accountable every single week, and the full story is worse than the headline. Jorge Armando Contreras was born in 1971 in Santa Ana, California, the second of 4 children in a Mexican-American family that had crossed the border 2 generations earlier. His father worked the loading dock at a citrus packing house off Grand Avenue, 12-hour shifts that left his hands smelling like orange oil and his back permanently curved. His mother cleaned offices in downtown Santa Ana at night, walking home along First Street when the buses stopped running. The Contreras family lived in a 2-bedroom rental on Minter Street, 4 kids in one room, plastic over the windows in winter, a swamp cooler in the kitchen window in summer. Money was always the topic at the dinner table, not how to spend it, how to make it stretch. Jorge was the kid who counted. He counted the cans in the pantry. He counted the coins in his mother's purse before she went to the grocery store. By the time he was 9, he was the one balancing his parents' checkbook at the kitchen table on Sunday afternoons, a pencil in one hand and a stack of paper bills from Edison and SoCalGas in the other. His mother called him mi contador, my accountant. She said it with pride. She had no idea what she was naming him. He was a quiet student at Saddleback High in the late 80s. Teachers wrote that he was reliable, polite, and unusually disciplined for a teenager. He played junior varsity baseball for 1 season, second base, and then quit because the practices interfered with the after-school job he had taken at a Mexican grocery store on Bristol, stocking shelves and running the register. He saved every paycheck. He kept the cash in a metal lockbox under his bed. By his senior year, he had over $3,000 in that box, which is what paid his enrollment fees at Santa Ana College the following fall. He transferred to Cal State Fullerton in 1992 and graduated with a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in accounting in 1994. He was 23 years old. He was the first person in his family to finish a 4-year degree. His mother framed the diploma and hung it in the living room above the television, where it stayed for the next 29 years. His first job was as a junior accountant for a small CPA firm in Orange, handling tax returns for restaurants and dental practices. He made $28,000 a year. He earned his CPA license in 1997. He moved to a larger firm in Irvine. He met his future wife at a wedding in Buena Park in 1998. They married in 2001 at a Catholic church in Santa Ana, the same church where his parents had been married 36 years earlier. In 2006, the Magnolia School District in Anaheim posted an opening for a senior director of fiscal services. The district was small, only 9 schools, but the job came with stability, a public pension, full benefits, and the kind of community visibility that a private firm could not match. Jorge applied. The interview panel described him in their notes as detail-oriented, conscientious, and committed to public service. He was hired in August 2006 at a starting salary of $96,000. He was 35 years old, His first day, he was given a key to the finance suite at the district office on Crescent Avenue in Anaheim. He was given access codes to the general fund, the student body account, the cafeteria account, and the federal Title I disbursement account. He was given a parking spot with his name on it, and he was given, in the words of the superintendent who hired him, complete trust. For the first 10 years, that trust looked entirely deserved. He came in early. He stayed late. He answered emails on weekends. He attended every school board meeting and delivered budget presentations so thorough that board members joked he was the only person in the room who actually read the line items. He coached newer staff. He sat on regional finance committees for the Orange County Department of Education. He earned 3 consecutive merit raises. By 2015, his salary was $142,000. His evaluations described him as the backbone of the district's financial operations. He bought a 4-bedroom house in Yorba Linda in 2008 for $612,000. His wife taught kindergarten at a private school in Brea. They had 2 children. They drove a Honda Odyssey and a Toyota Camry. They took family vacations to San Diego and once to Cabo San Lucas for their 10th anniversary. They were, by every outward measure, an Orange County middle-class success story. The son of a citrus packer who had become the man trusted to safeguard the budget of a public school district. Then something shifted. The Magnolia School District serves about 6,000 students across 9 schools in Anaheim and Stanton. Preschool through 6th grade. The student demographics are not subtle. 81% are classified as socio-economically disadvantaged. The district qualifies for substantial federal funding under Title I, the federal program that supplements public schools serving high concentrations of low-income children. That federal money flows in alongside state per-pupil funding, local property tax allocations, parcel taxes, and the small but symbolically important student body account, which holds the proceeds from book fairs, fundraisers, popcorn sales, and pennies that kindergartners drop into plastic jugs. All of that money funneled through one office, Fiscal Services, and one signature ultimately certified that every account reconciled to the penny at the end of every month. The Senior Director of Fiscal Services. In a properly designed financial control system, no single employee is supposed to have unilateral check-writing authority, sole reconciliation authority, and sole authority to present the reconciled statements to the board. There is supposed to be a separation. The person who writes the checks is not supposed to be the person who reconciles the bank statements. The person who reconciles the statements is not supposed to be the person who certifies them to oversight. Multiple sets of eyes, multiple signatures, layered review, that is the textbook. The reality, in a small district with a tight administrative budget and a director who had been there for over a decade and was trusted absolutely, was different. Jorge wrote the checks. Jorge reconciled the bank statements. Jorge prepared the packets that went to the board. Jorge answered the auditor's questions when the annual audit came around. Jorge was, functionally, every checkpoint in the chain. And the board, the superintendent, and the outside auditor all believed that the checks and balances were in place because the packets they received from Jorge said they were. The student body account was the soft spot. Most people picture school finance and they think of the big general fund, the millions in state money, the federal grants. But the student body account is different. It is small, it is informal, it is fed by checks from PTA fundraisers and cash from carnival night and credit card payments from book orders. It moves through the bank in dozens of small transactions a week. It is the kind of account that nobody outside the finance office really watches, because nobody outside the finance office really understands its flow. Jorge understood its flow. He had designed half of it. The district trusted him. The board trusted him. The auditors trusted the documents he handed them. 81% of the kids in his district qualified as poor. And the man whose job was to safeguard every dollar that flowed through their schools was about to discover that nobody was checking his work. The first unauthorized check was written in early 2016. The exact amount has never been made fully public, but court filings describe it as comparatively modest. A few $1,000s, made out to a fictitious vendor name that Jorge had typed onto a blank check stock and then countersigned himself. He took it to a Bank of America branch in Yorba Linda and deposited it into his personal checking account through the ATM. He waited. Nothing happened. No phone call, no question from the bank, no follow-up from any colleague. Nobody at the district noticed that the check existed. Nobody at the bank noticed that a small school district's account was sending checks made out to vendors that did not exist. The reconciliation that month was performed by Jorge. He signed off on it himself. The second check came a few weeks later, larger. The third came the following month. By the end of 2016, prosecutors would later allege he had written more than a dozen unauthorized checks to himself, totaling several $100,000. His method was almost embarrassingly simple. He would take blank check stock from the district's pre-printed check supply. He would fill in a fictitious payee name, usually something that sounded like a plausible vendor. School supply company names, educational consulting firm names, names that would not raise an eyebrow if a board member glanced at a check register. He would inflate the amount to whatever he had decided to take that week. He would sign as the issuing authority, and because he was also the reconciling authority, he would then prepare a bank reconciliation packet that quietly omitted those checks, or substituted falsified bank statements that showed different transaction histories than what had actually cleared. The packets he handed to his colleagues and to the board looked exactly like what a clean set of books should look like. Beginning balance, deposits, disbursements, ending balance, reconciled to the penny, every month, for 7 years. The pace escalated. In 2017, the total climbed past $1 million. In 2018, he passed $2 million. By 2020, he was taking, on average, over $200,000 a month, some months more. There would later be a single 30-day period in which prosecutors documented over $400,000 in unauthorized payments, and the lifestyle escalated with it. The Honda Odyssey became a 2021 BMW. The family vacations to San Diego became trips to Napa, Cabo, and eventually international destinations. The Yorba Linda house was renovated. A new kitchen, a new pool, designer light fixtures imported from Italy. His wife, who knew nothing of any of this, would later tell investigators that she had assumed Jorge's increased income reflected investment returns and consulting work he had told her he was doing on the side. The Louis Vuitton collection started small. One bag, given as an anniversary gift in 2018, then 2 more for Christmas, then 5, then 12. The shelves in the master closet were modified to accommodate them. By 2022, the collection had outgrown the closet and migrated to a dedicated room. Mostly Louis Vuitton, some Chanel, some Hermes, jewelry to match, watches, 8 bottles of Clase Azul Ultra tequila, the high-end ultra-aged version that retails for around $2,500 a bottle, lined up on a custom shelf in the dining room. And then there was the cash. Because at some point, the deposits became too large to keep running through a single personal checking account without attracting attention. So Jorge stopped depositing all of it. He started keeping some of it physical, bundled, banded, stacked, stored, in a mini fridge, in his garage. It was a small white mini fridge, the kind a college kid keeps in a dorm room, plugged into a wall outlet next to a wine cabinet. The shelves had been removed. The interior was packed floor to ceiling with bundled $100 bills. Stacks and stacks and stacks of cash, chilled at approximately 38 degrees Fahrenheit, sitting in his garage, while 3 miles away, children in the district he served were eating subsidized lunches because their families could not afford to feed them otherwise. The signs were there, of course. They are always there. A director making $142,000 a year was driving a BMW. His wife, a private school kindergarten teacher, was carrying a different Louis Vuitton handbag to school every week. The Yorba Linda home renovations were visible from the street. Colleagues noticed. Colleagues commented to each other. Colleagues asked gently where the money was coming from. Jorge always had an answer. Investments, a family inheritance, his wife's side business, consulting work. The answers were never quite the same twice. But Jorge had spent 17 years building a reputation for being the most trustworthy person in the building, and that reputation absorbed the contradictions. No one called the auditor. No one called the board. No one called the FBI. In the summer of 2023, a mid-level employee in the Magnolia School District business office was asked to fill in on a reconciliation review while Jorge was on a one-week vacation in Hawaii. The employee, whose name has not been made public, was a relatively recent hire. They were not part of Jorge's inner circle. They had no particular reason to assume the books were anything other than clean. But they were also new enough that they did not yet know which questions you were not supposed to ask. They pulled up the most recent bank statement for the student body account directly from the bank's online portal. Then they pulled up the reconciliation packet Jorge had prepared for the previous month. And they noticed something that should not have been possible. The two documents did not match. The bank's online statement showed several checks that did not appear on Jorge's reconciliation. The amounts on the reconciliation were not the amounts on the actual cleared checks. The payee names on the cleared checks were not the payee names listed in the district's vendor database. The employee printed both documents. They walked them down the hall to the assistant superintendent's office. They closed the door. They said, "I think something is wrong." The assistant superintendent pulled 3 more months of statements. The discrepancies were not isolated. They were not occasional. They were everywhere. Once you knew what to look for, the pattern was so consistent, it was almost rhythmic. 2 to 5 unauthorized checks a month, sometimes more, sometimes much more. Going back, when they pulled the earlier records, year after year after year. The district contacted outside legal counsel on the morning of August 14th, 2023. By the end of that same day, the district had placed Jorge on administrative leave, locked him out of every system, and changed every password he had ever known. They contacted the FBI the following day. The Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division joined the case within 72 hours, because at the dollar amounts involved, federal tax exposure was almost certain. We are about to get into the search warrant and the photographs that made this case go viral. If you have stuck with me this far, do me one favor: subscribe. These cases do not get the coverage they deserve in mainstream media, and the only way we keep doing them is if the channel grows. Drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Then stay with me. The mini fridge is coming. Federal agents executed a search warrant on the Yorba Linda residence on the morning of August 24th, 2023. Jorge was home. He answered the door in shorts and a t-shirt. He was told to step outside and wait on the front lawn while the search was conducted. He sat on the lawn for the next 4 hours and watched agents in blue windbreakers carry his life out of his house in cardboard boxes. They found the handbags first, 57 of them, most of them Louis Vuitton, lined up on dedicated shelving in a spare bedroom that had been converted into a display room. Each one was photographed in place. Each one was tagged. The estimated retail value of the collection alone was over $200,000. They found the jewelry. They found the watches. They found the 8 bottles of Clase Azul Ultra. They found the 2021 BMW in the garage. They found financial records, paper bank statements, and a laptop with 7 years of falsified reconciliation packets stored as PDF files in a folder labeled, with no apparent irony, backups. And then an agent opened the mini fridge. The photograph that was eventually released to the public showed the small white refrigerator with its door open, the interior packed from the bottom of the unit to the top, with bundled, banded stacks of $100 bills. The shelves had been removed to maximize capacity. Beside the fridge, in the photograph, sat a row of Louis Vuitton handbags, lined up like product on a retail floor. A school district's money, chilled in a personal appliance, next to a personal designer boutique, in a private garage in Yorba Linda. It was the photograph that made the case famous. It ran in the Los Angeles Times. It ran in American Banker. It ran on every Orange County television station within 48 hours. It was the kind of image that did not need a caption. The story told itself. The forensic accounting took months. Agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, working with the FBI, reconstructed every unauthorized payment going back to 2016. The final tally was staggering: more than 250 unauthorized checks, approximately $16,694,942, embezzled across 7 years and 1 month from a school district where 4 out of every 5 children qualified as low income. Law enforcement seized roughly $7.7 million worth of property: the Yorba Linda house, the BMW, the 57 handbags, the jewelry, the tequila, bank accounts in his name and accounts that had been routed through other names. The remaining $9 million was, in the words of one federal prosecutor, gone, spent, vanished into a lifestyle that could not be undone by handing the toys back. The falsified bank reconciliation packets were entered into evidence. There were 84 of them, one for every month of his scheme, each one a small printed lie, handed to colleagues across a conference table by a man who said, "Here are the numbers. Everything reconciles." Agents interviewed Jorge for the first time on the afternoon of the search, after the mini fridge had been opened and photographed. He was read his rights. He was offered the chance to speak with an attorney. He waived that right initially and agreed to sit at his own kitchen table with 2 federal agents across from him. The lead agent placed the photograph of the open mini fridge on the table between them. The agent spoke first. Agent: "Mr. Contreras, we are going to give you one chance to tell us about this." Jorge did not look at the photograph. He looked at the wall behind the agent's shoulder. Jorge: "I would like to call my lawyer." Agent: "That is your right. Before you do, can you tell us where this money came from?" Jorge: "I would like to call my lawyer." Agent: "Mr. Contreras, the district has already shown us 7 years of bank reconciliations. We know what is in this house. We know what is in those bags. We know what is in this fridge. Is there anything you want to say before we end this conversation?" Jorge was quiet for a long moment. His hands were flat on the kitchen table. According to the agent's later report, he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, the way a man does when he has been waiting for a long time for something he knew was eventually coming. Jorge: "I am sorry." Those were the last words he spoke to federal investigators without an attorney present. A federal grand jury in the Central District of California returned an indictment in early 2024. The charge was a single count, but it was the kind of count that carried the full weight of the federal sentencing guidelines: embezzlement, theft, and intentional misapplication of funds from an organization receiving federal funds. The statute exists specifically because Title I money from the federal government flows through districts like Magnolia, and stealing from those districts is stealing from a federally funded program. Jorge's defense attorney, a private criminal defense lawyer based in Newport Beach, negotiated a plea agreement. In exchange for a guilty plea on the single count, the government agreed not to pursue additional tax evasion charges that could have stacked years onto the eventual sentence. Jorge entered his guilty plea in federal court in Santa Ana in the spring of 2024. The sentencing hearing was held on July 25, 2024, before United States District Judge Fred W. Slaughter. The district sent a representative to read a victim impact statement. She was the assistant superintendent who had received the printed reconciliation discrepancies on August 14, 2023. She stood at the lectern in a navy suit, her hands shaking slightly, and she spoke about what $16.7 million meant in a district where 81% of students were classified as low income. It meant, she said, the difference between adequate textbooks and used textbooks. The difference between a music program and no music program. The difference between intervention specialists and waiting lists. It meant, she said, a betrayal so total that the staff of the district was still struggling to look at each other in meetings. He sat across the table from us, she said, and he handed us paper that said everything was fine, every month, for 7 years, while our children went without. Jorge's attorney spoke next. He described his client as a man who had taken full responsibility, who was deeply remorseful, who had cooperated with the forfeiture process, who had a family, who had elderly parents, who had no prior criminal record. He asked the court for leniency. Judge Slaughter listened. Then he spoke. Mr. Contreras, you were not stealing from a bank. You were not stealing from a corporation. You were stealing from a school district in which the overwhelming majority of children come from families that struggle to put food on the table. You were the person trusted to safeguard every dollar of their education. And you treated that trust as a personal credit line for handbags and tequila and a luxury automobile. You did this for 7 years. You did this 250 separate times. You did this knowing exactly what you were doing, knowing exactly who you were taking from, and knowing exactly what the consequences would be if you were ever caught. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a pattern of choices. The judge paused. He looked at the courtroom. Then he looked back at Jorge. The court sentences you to 70 months in federal prison. The court orders restitution in the full amount of $16,694,942. The court further orders forfeiture of all seized property. Jorge was remanded into the custody of the United States Marshals Service. He was processed through the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles before being designated to a federal correctional institution. As of his designation, he was assigned to a low-security federal facility in the Western region. His projected release date places him in his late 50s. The restitution order will follow him for the rest of his life. Federal restitution does not expire. His wages for the remainder of his working years will be garnished. The seized assets, including the home, the BMW, the handbags, the jewelry, the tequila, and the cash that came out of the mini fridge, were liquidated and applied against the restitution balance. Even after all of it, the district will recover only a fraction of what was taken. The mini fridge itself, the small white appliance that became the photograph that defined the case, was logged as evidence and held in a federal evidence locker. It will eventually be destroyed. Most of the children who attended Magnolia School District during the 7 years Jorge Armando Contreras was stealing from them have moved on to middle school, high school, and in some cases, beyond. They will never know his name. They will never know that the man whose signature appeared on the bottom of every reconciliation packet that crossed the superintendent's desk had built a private boutique in his garage with money that should have bought their textbooks. This case was disturbing, but the case on the right-hand side of your screen right now is even more outrageous. Click it.